Every year, the same story plays out across America. A storm rolls in. Winds climb past 80 miles per hour. And neighborhoods that took decades to build get erased in under an hour. Roofs gone. Walls collapsed. Families standing in the rain, staring at what used to be their living room. Then come the insurance adjusters, the contractors, the six-figure rebuilding quotes. Here's what makes that painful to watch. There is a building that survived all of it. A building that has been surviving it since 1941. One that costs under $30,000 to put up and outperforms a $428,000 stick frame house in almost every extreme weather category that matters. We stopped building it. Not because it failed, because we decided it looked wrong. That single decision, made in the late 1940s over appearances, is still costing American families hundreds of thousands of dollars today. So let's walk through exactly what we gave up, why it worked so well, and why in 2025 it might matter more than ever. Start with a number that should genuinely bother you. The average new home in America costs over $428,000 to construct, and that's before land. It takes up to a year to finish. It requires licensed framers, roofers, plumbers, electricians, and a general contractor managing all of them. And when it's finally done, FEMA's own research confirms it is vulnerable to catastrophic failure in high winds. Category 1 hurricane force, the absolute weakest level on the scale, starts at 74 miles per hour. That's enough to pull a standard roof off a standard house. Now hold that number, because a fully outfitted 960 square foot building, structurally superior in nearly every measurable way, is available today for under $30,000 in materials. A small group of people with zero construction experience can assemble it over a single weekend. That gap, $428,000 versus $30,000, is not a gap in technology. It's not a gap in materials science. It's a gap in the choices we made and then normalized for 80 years. To understand why that gap exists, you first need to understand the building that exposes it. The Quonset Hut looks almost too simple to take seriously. A half-cylinder of corrugated steel sitting on a flat floor. No corners, no separate roof system. No complicated joints where walls meet ceilings. The whole structure curves continuously from one side of the ground to the other, meeting in the middle like a tunnel cut in half. And that shape, the one that looks basic enough to dismiss, is precisely why this building survives conditions that flatten everything around it. But here's the question worth asking first. Why does any roof fail at all? Think about what a flat roof actually does. Every raindrop, every pound of snow, every gust of wind is pushing straight down into the walls supporting it. Those walls carry all of that force, all the time. If they have any weakness, a compromised joint, aging lumber, a design flaw, the structure eventually gives. That's why conventional buildings need trusses, rafters, load-bearing interior walls, and a separate roof structure sitting on top of the frame. All of it exists to hold up a flat surface that gravity never stops attacking. Now bend that same surface into a curve. Roman engineers figured this out roughly 2,000 years ago. When you form a roof into an arch, something counterintuitive happens. Instead of sending force straight down into the walls, the arch redirects it, outward and downward simultaneously along the curve. The load distributes across every inch of the structure, rather than concentrating at specific points. No single joint carries the weight. Every part shares it with every other part. That's why Roman aqueducts are still standing. That's why medieval cathedrals built on the same principle have survived earthquakes, wars, and centuries of weather. The arch doesn't fight gravity. It works with it. The Quonset Hut is that same ancient principle applied to a portable steel structure. And because the arch handles all the structural work, something else becomes possible. Something that makes conventional builders genuinely uncomfortable when they think about it. No rafters, no load-bearing walls, no complicated roof system fighting gravity from the inside. The shell is the structure. Roof, walls, and frame are a single continuous piece. There are no joints to fail because the surfaces never separate in the first place. Now add corrugated steel to that arch, and the strength compounds further. Those ridges running along each panel resist bending forces without adding meaningful weight. A flat steel sheet buckles easily under pressure. Corrugate it, and it becomes dramatically stiffer. Curve it into an arch, and you've built something where every single element reinforces every other element simultaneously. Picture this. It's the winter of 1944. A supply base somewhere in the Aleutian Islands, off the coast of Alaska. Temperature well below zero. A Pacific storm rolling in with winds gusting past 100 miles per hour. Wooden structures on the base groan under the pressure. Sheet metal rattles loose. Some roofs lose their grip entirely and peel back like the lid of an opened can. The Quonset huts don't move. Wind finds no flat surface to grab onto. It flows over the curve and keeps going, the same way water moves around a stone in a river rather than crashing into it. There's no wall-to-roof joint to separate because those two surfaces are the same surface. Nothing to pry apart, nothing to fail. That wasn't luck. That was geometry doing exactly what it was designed to do. The building that proved all of this was designed in 60 days, under military deadline pressure. In 1941, the U.S. Navy handed a specific and seemingly impossible assignment to two men at the George A. Fuller Construction Company, engineer Peter de Jong and architect Otto Brandenberger, both already working at a naval installation on a stretch of Rhode Island coastline called Quonset Point. The requirement was blunt. Design a portable structure that untrained personnel could assemble in a single day using only hand tools. Light enough to cross oceans in cargo ships. Strong enough to survive wherever the war required. Cheap enough to build by the tens of thousands. They didn't start from nothing. 30 years earlier, a Canadian-American mining engineer named Peter Nissen had built a similar half-cylinder shelter for British Royal Engineers on the Western Front. He had a working prototype within a week. By September 1916, it was in mass production, and more than 100,000 Nissen huts were built before World War I ended. De Jong and Brandenberger took that proven foundation and rebuilt it for industrial scale. The result was 35% lighter to ship, 60% cheaper to produce, and faster to assemble, reduced from 3 arch sections to 2, cutting both assembly time and hardware requirements significantly. It standardized at 20 feet wide by 48 feet long, 960 square feet of completely open, column-free floor space. The kit arrived with everything included: steel ribs, corrugated panels, plywood flooring, insulation, interior lining, windows, doors, and a chimney. Over the next 4 years, more than 170,000 were deployed to every theater of the war: Alaska, the Pacific, North Africa. The same building handled Arctic blizzards and tropical typhoons without modification. The largest single Quonset structure built during the war was a 54,000 square foot warehouse on Guam, assembled entirely from prefabricated kits. Many of those original buildings are still standing today. Think about that. Buildings assembled in the field by soldiers with no construction training, meant to last long enough for a war to end. And they're still here 80 years later. If this is the kind of thing you find worth knowing, go ahead and subscribe. This channel covers lost construction knowledge, forgotten engineering, and the old methods that keep outperforming what we're paying fortunes to replace them with. When the war ended in 1945, the military had a surplus it didn't know what to do with. Tens of thousands of Quonset huts sitting idle across the country. The solution was to sell them to the American public for roughly $1,000 each. What followed was brief, remarkable, and almost entirely forgotten. Veterans who couldn't afford conventional housing bought them and moved in. Farmers turned them into barns and equipment storage. Universities flooded with GI Bill students deployed them as dormitories and classrooms overnight. The University of Iowa built an entire married student housing complex called Quonset Park. A veterans housing community in Los Angeles used them to shelter families with nowhere else to go. In Hawaii, locals gave them a nickname, Kamaboko houses, after a traditional fish cake they resembled in shape. Sherwin-Williams developed a dedicated paint line specifically for coating the steel exteriors. In Nashville, two brothers named Bradley purchased a surplus unit and converted it into a recording studio, Columbia Records Studio B. That building became the physical cornerstone of Music Row. Some of the most iconic country music in American history was recorded inside a $1,000 military hut. The Strand Steel Company published a press release in 1946, listing 257 documented uses already in practice across the country: homes, churches, grocery stores, repair shops, Sunday schools. At roughly $1.50 per square foot, nothing in the market came close. And then the momentum collapsed. Not the buildings, the cultural appetite for them. The reasons weren't structural. They were psychological. And they're worth understanding clearly, because they explain a pattern that still shapes the housing market today. Veterans didn't want a building that reminded them of the war they'd just survived. Years of barracks life, mud, cold, crowding, constant fear, had made the curved steel ceiling feel like confinement. Coming home was supposed to mean leaving all of that behind. The Quonset Hut was a daily reminder of everything they needed to forget. There was also the unmistakable dimension of status. In post-war America, your house communicated who you had become. A colonial with shutters and a trimmed lawn said one thing clearly. A metal half-cylinder said something very different, and everyone knew it. Practical friction existed too. Curved interior walls created awkward geometry for standard rectangular furniture. Beds and appliances had to be pulled away from the edges. The 960 square feet on paper shrank in practice as the sloping sides consumed usable floor area near the walls. But the decisive blow came from forces entirely outside the building itself. Developers like Levitt and Sons had solved the mass production of conventional stick-frame homes. Levittown opened in 1947 and offered something the Quonset Hut structurally could not: a house that looked exactly like the life Americans had been promised. Government-backed GI Bill mortgages made buying one nearly frictionless. The entire construction industry standardized around stick framing. Building codes, supply chains, contractor training, all of it formed around one model. The Quonset Hut didn't fit those systems, so it was quietly set aside. Not because it broke down, not because something better came along, because the story around it changed, and in America, that turned out to be enough. Here's what that story has been costing us in the decades since. Stick frame houses need a new roof every 15 to 20 years. They require ongoing termite treatment, exterior paint cycles, and siding replacement. Wood components absorb moisture, expand, contract, and rot. And when a serious storm hits, the joint between the wall and the roof, the exact vulnerability the arch eliminates by not having one, is consistently where they fail first. Meanwhile, the Quonset Hut kept going. The U.S. Army still uses them at Camp Casey, near the Korean DMZ. The Nevada National Security Site uses them as active workshops today. 7 original World War II-era units are preserved at the CB Museum in North Kingstown, Rhode Island. Original WWI-era Nissen huts, a full generation older than the Quonset design, remain standing in Alaska. The corrugated galvanized steel that made people uneasy about appearances has proven to resist rust, fire, and pests with minimal upkeep. No wood to rot, no shingles to degrade, no trusses to buckle under snow load. A well-maintained Quonset hut lasts between 50 and 80 years. Some experts put that number considerably higher. Every practical complaint from the 1940s has since been resolved. Modern spray foam insulation delivers R30 or better thermal performance. Updated designs incorporate vertical sidewalls that recover the floor space the original curve consumed. Custom end walls with standard windows and skylights produce interiors that feel nothing like military barracks. Assembly still takes a weekend for a small group with basic tools. A starter kit today runs under $10,000. A fully outfitted residential scale version lands under $30,000 before site prep and utilities. Now consider the world those numbers are landing in right now. Home affordability in the United States has reached crisis levels not seen in generations. First-time buyers are being systematically priced out of markets across the country. Construction costs keep rising. The workforce of licensed tradespeople required to build a conventional home is shrinking, and the climate disruption driving more frequent and more severe storm seasons shows no sign of slowing. The regions hit hardest by that combination: rural communities, coastal areas, lower-income households, are often the least equipped to absorb a $428,000 rebuilding cycle every time a major storm passes through. Prefabricated construction is drawing serious renewed attention from architects, disaster relief organizations, and municipal planners who recognize the traditional build model is no longer serving the people who need housing most. Steel arch structures are reappearing in emergency shelter deployments, off-grid residential projects, and climate-resilient housing initiatives in numbers not seen since the post-war years. Here's the thing worth sitting with: the specific conditions that made the Quonset Hut relevant in 1945. Acute housing scarcity, severe cost pressure, the need for structures that can survive extreme and unpredictable weather are not historical curiosities. They are present conditions, and they are getting worse, not better. A building designed to solve an impossible problem in 60 days may be exactly what the next chapter of American housing requires. There's a Quonset Hut in a museum in Rhode Island, built during World War II, structurally intact. The original corrugated steel panels holding exactly as designed, more than 80 years after soldiers with no construction training assembled them in a field. The average American home built in the same era has been renovated multiple times. Many were demolished entirely. One ended up behind glass as a relic. The other became the standard. We chose the one that told a better story about who we were. We've been paying the difference ever since. In maintenance costs, in reconstruction bills, in communities that disappear after a single bad storm season. The Roman arch is still standing. The Quonset Hut is still standing. The engineering never failed. The only question left is whether we're finally ready to care more about what a building actually does than what it says about us.